On the Jacob Beer Show today, welcome back, everybody. I'm happy to have on Marc Tarpenning. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great today.
Better today. I know you guys had some storms couple throughout the last couple of days in the Palo Alto area. So good to see everything's holding up well.
Yeah, they screwed most of it back together again, so that's good.
Right on. So for some of our guests who might not know, you co-founded Tesla.
And strange but true. Yes.
Yes, and for other people who think that's Elon's title. Well, companies, it's not one person making it. Even if one person gets big off of it, it's a lot of different people behind the scenes making that product come to life. So tell us a little bit about your story, how you got involved and how you co-founded Tesla, basically.
Yeah. So first off, it's great to be on the show. So in 2003, Martin Eberhard and I started Tesla. In fact, so it's coming up on 20 years this coming July. We got interested in the idea of electric vehicles for a variety of reasons. Climate change was becoming kind of real in 2003, although it was still a little bit controversial, but not like it is now, where there's like it's obvious. And also, I had spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and seeing what our money does in the Middle East for oil was not exactly, inspiring. So I really thought we should do something to reduce oil consumption. So Martin was the one who first really brought up the idea, and he wanted an electric car. And there had been some electric cars, but they all got shut down. And the more we thought about it and the more research we did, it just made more and more sense. And we saw that the technology was just possible. The battery is all about the batteries fundamentally. And we were familiar with batteries from consumer electronics days. So we knew that the batteries just kept getting better and cheaper. And we did all the math and just determined that we could make a really compelling car. And we had to figure out how we were going to make a car. So we spent about 6 months, really trying to understand how we could actually go into production and how we could make a car. And and at the end of the year, after the Christmas holidays, we went looking for money and sort of started shaking the trees in January. And by April, we had our first round of funding. And Elon was the lead investor in that. We had two small venture firms who had already said yes, and we were then looking for a lead, and we went down to SpaceX and pitched him, and he said yes.
Interesting. So yeah, for those of the people that don't know, a lot of people think that, Elon started SpaceX way after when of course he used a lot of his money from PayPal and Tesla to get a big chunk into that, and both have become a success story.
But yeah, SpaceX is amazing, but yeah, he'd only started SpaceX about a year before when we went down and pitched him. Which one of the great things about that was just that we had this crazy idea of an electric car company, and that was kind of a big stretch for a lot of the venture capitalists here in Silicon Valley. But when you go down and the person is literally building rocket ships, and your idea just isn't that crazy in comparison.
For sure. And one thing about so many great leaders, I don't want to talk too much about this, is, like you said, extraordinary, people who have that vision who are going to believe in you. Like you said, you kind of thought your idea was crazy, at the time. Now,
Hmm.
of course, Ford and others are trying it. But at the time, it was crazy. I mean, you still had Pontiac and so many other big companies around back then. And, here comes a guy who decided to believe in the brand and said, I'll hear you out on it. So,
Yep.
incredible story.
And then he was a board member for years, and would come to the board meetings and be very supportive. He was always very supportive of the mission, and he believed. And eventually, of course, he becomes CEO, but that was, he's the fourth CEO, in case anyone's keeping track.
Who were the first three? If you and not I want to stand too long on just one topic about the CEOs, but
Yeah.
who were the other
So,
three?
so Martin and I started Tesla. So Martin was the CEO, and he was CEO for the first 5 years, basically. And then, so after Martin Eberhard, as we're going to production, he gets kind of ousted because we had some production problems. And then we had Michael Marks, who was the former CEO of Flextronics. And he was only an interim CEO, though, because he had his own thing he was doing a few months later. But he was willing to come in for a few months and help out. And he's an expert in manufacturing, which was we were struggling to get into full scale manufacturing for the Roadster. So he was super helpful. And then the board appointed a guy named Zev Drory, who was the former founder of Monolithic Memory, which is an old Silicon Valley company. And Zev, I'm sure he's great, but he was not a good fit for Tesla. And so that went on. He was there for about 6 months, I guess, something about that. Um, and then I didn't think he was a good fit, but the board seemed to really like him. And then the board, I guess, decided that they didn't really like him anymore,
Wow.
and he was suddenly out. And Elon became CEO, which was a great choice because he had always been super supportive. He had a lot of money in the company. He was always a believer. So, and then of course he, drove the company, in a great direction. And it became, super successful. So.
Interesting. And of course, I don't want to spend too much time on just this because you're doing a bunch of other stuff too. That's really cool and outstanding. Um, but basically, from there, at the time when it wasn't as big of a thing until today, what was kind of that process then through like the 2010s through like up until I really didn't even, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't hear about Tesla until about 2016, 2017, when I saw some celebrity self-driving a car and I was like, that's pretty cool. And then everyone at school has it as their screensaver on their school laptop, and it's like, wow. Oh, Elon Musk, some guy named Elon Musk found it. He's from South Africa, and then as I did the research now that I'm a senior in high school, it's like, oh, there's some other stuff. So how did it kind of expand throughout that period of time?
Yeah, so when I left, actually when Zev was CEO, I had three little kids at home, and I was kind of ready to leave. So that's when I left, and then Elon became CEO shortly after that. And if I had known Elon was going to be CEO, I probably would have stayed a little bit longer and worked with him more directly. I mean, I saw him on the board all the time, but it would have been kind of fun to have been there when he was there as CEO. So we were finishing the road. So the Roadster was going into production, which was the original Roadster. And that was our first car. And it was, sort of being assembled in the UK by Lotus for us. But all the things that make the car go, we were manufacturing all over the world. So the motors, inverters, all the electronics, the battery system, all the wires, everything that makes the car go was our thing. And we knew that getting into the sedan market was the sedan market is like 1,000 times bigger than or maybe 10,000 times bigger than the sports car market. So we knew we had to get into the sedan market to actually have impact. And we were very concerned that the big guys, if you will, the big car companies, once they saw the Roadster, they would just destroy. They would just put $1 billion in and come up with some competing sedan. So we really went headlong into the sedan project, and that was, I guess that was like 2008, time frame. And so we were working on it, and then announced it probably, I think, about 2010 is when the sedan was announced. We didn't ship it for another couple of years, and that was one that we built from scratch in the sense that we had our own factory at that point, and we were gonna build them the way we wanted to build them, which is a little bit different than a traditional car. It's a little simpler and a little bit more interesting. So then once the sedan came out, that was a huge success, and it really pushed the volumes up because the market is so much bigger. Once the sedan was really cranking, then all bets were off. Then we had to build new factories, and Elon really pushed to expand Tesla all over the world to take advantage of the interest in the sedan, and then the Model 3 and the Model X and the Model Y. But it was all expansion, but everything is based on the same sort of drivetrain and battery technology. That we every iteration we get better at it. Tesla gets better at it. So it's Tesla's definitely ahead of all the other car companies now. Now the other car companies are all building electric cars, and their drivetrains are like Tesla's were 6 or 7 years ago.
For sure.
They'll get there. I mean, for sure they'll get there. And in many ways, they know how to put cars together really, really well. So that's not a problem. It's just that the drivetrains they don't have much experience with, so they're still learning about that.
Interesting. So that's a real reason why, because like Ford's came out and Chevy and some of them with hybrids, and that's going to advance them onto electric and all that. And what's going to be really interesting is like Gavin Newsom, the governor, had signed a law, I want to say 2034, 2036. So it'll be interesting to see if that law doesn't get reversed, just how quick, who becomes the leader in it potentially, if it is Tesla that ends up standing, or if it's Ford, or
Well, it
who
might. So,
knows?
well, so the law you're referring to says basically you can't sell internal combustion engines in California after
Correct.
2035. Now, and that's the same time frame as the European Union basically is saying 2035 or 2040, depending on which country is also saying that. Interestingly, the reason why the car companies did not put up a big fight for that was that in the intervening, 2 years before Gavin Newsom signed this, which is an executive order, so it can be overturned pretty easily, but before he signed that, the car companies, Volkswagen said that they weren't going to be producing. Volkswagen is the second largest car company in the world.
They own everything. Audi,
Yeah,
you name it.
exactly. And they said they wouldn't be producing internal combustion engines after 2035. Uh, and
The
and that's
e-tron is something that they have,
exactly. And they're going to go fully electric. Toyota had announced, and Toyota is the world's largest company, that Lexus would be an exclusively electric only. That's their premium brand is Lexus, and those would only be EVs starting in 2030. So they and I think and Ford also, I think, said that they were going to stop producing internal combustion engines worldwide by 2040. So, all of the car companies are on the mission to get out of the internal combustion engine. So 2035, is pretty darn close to where they were all expecting to be out of business, out of the internal combustion engine business anyway. So
So
that's
it might have more been a political thing to look good.
our governor doing something political, hard to imagine.
So yeah, interesting. And then the last thing about Tesla I kind of want to ask is, do you own a Tesla?
Oh yes.
And the
Yeah,
reason why I ask that is in the past I've interviewed one of the co-founders of Apple, and he does not own an Apple product. So now I got to ask every co-founder of a major company, do you own that product? Just
oh yeah,
because
no,
I got to
I
ask that question to everybody now. So
I am on my second one. Actually, I had a very early Model S, one of the very first sedans that came out of Model S, and I drove that for 130,000, 140,000 miles or something like that. And then I recently, a couple years ago, bought a new Model S because I wanted all-wheel drive. I wanted the longer range because the batteries had gotten better. I wanted the slightly better interior and some better stuff. And 140,000 miles, any car, you're kind of thinking, maybe it's time to replace it. It worked perfect. It was, like a totally fine. It worked fine. But I just wanted a new car. It had been, almost 10 years, so I picked up a new Model S, and it's great, and I love that. And then just because I live in a place powered by PG&E, which seems to have power outages, routinely. I also have Tesla Powerwalls on my house, which are like magic because the power fails and you don't even notice it. And we have solar on the house, so we can go, forever really if we're a little careful between the Powerwalls and the solar panels. Uh, the only issue was that recently this last week, when we didn't have power for a few days, our cable system, Comcast, which is the internet provider, they only back up for about 5 hours. So we had great internet for about 5 hours, and
wow.
then our internet went out, and that was kind of a disaster. But
Interesting. And then kind of last part, because I don't want to hold you for too long. I know it's been the last couple busy days, is you're now doing some new ventures. Tell us a little bit about that with what you can say.
oh yeah. So I'm a venture partner at a venture firm called Sparrow Ventures, which means hope in Latin. We are a $123 million fund. We invest in companies that make life better in some way, and that can be, planetary health, human play and work and joy. And it's not it's a venture firm, so there's no philanthropy. It's all about investing in companies that make a difference. And let's see, we have investments in. I have a company that monitors air quality that with sort of low cost sensors for lots of communities to be able to both monitor their own safety, their air quality safety, but also to be able to put, some political pressure on, leaders if they find out that there's, really bad particulates around a school or something. They
Like
can they
Flint potentially, or East Palestine, Ohio now.
Yes, exactly. So things like that, we have a lot, and they operate in about 160 countries around the world, so
Wow.
they're quite dispersed.
Do you
Um,
know if it's been ever used in like for Chernobyl? Because I know they still check the air levels, around
well,
their
that's
region.
radiation. That's a little bit
So
different.
no, okay.
Yeah, yeah. They
I'm
don't do
not a big
radiation.
science major. I do
Yeah,
know
that's
about the elements, but I'm
it,
not.
it, it's mainly particulates from like burning diesel is probably the main one, diesel trucks, but also lots of other industrial processes can release these really fine particulates which are bad for you. So we have companies like that. We have robotics companies. Another one that I'm quite fond of is a robotics company based in Denver that picks strawberries. They have fleets of robots that go into strawberry fields and pick strawberries, which looks super cool if you, you get to see one. Because to have 100 robots all picking strawberries is pretty neat.
And this is
Um,
all STEM stuff, of course, which is such a big thing with education nowadays.
oh yeah, everything that we invest in is a technology company in some way or another. We've looked at synthetic fuels. We've looked at a lot of synthetic biology stuff. We haven't actually. I think we've got one investment in synthetic biology. So it's a super exciting thing, and of course, at the moment, everything is about artificial intelligence. We don't have any specific investments in AI, but we look at lots of things that are powered by AI, and that's probably the most interesting aspects of how you use AI to do something else. AI in itself is interesting, but it's kind of more impressive if you're using AI to find drug discovery, or find new materials, reduce reduce wait times of lab results, things like that. So we look at a lot of things like that.
For sure. Well, I appreciate you coming on a Jacob Beer Show today. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Maybe any advice for people who might want to go into the field
No,
of
it's just
STEM?
STEM is cool. Engineering is sort of the revelation of how the world works in some sense, or the universe works. And once you kind of understand that, whether like my particular career, I did a variety of different. I'm a software programmer by trade, but I did a lot of networking stuff. I did hard disk design, um, and internet plumbing in various guises, electronic books, consumer products, and electric cars. They're all very similar. They have obviously differences, uh, but once you kind of understand how everything has to work, it allows you to move from career to career and really interest to interest, which I particularly like.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Jacob Beer Show today.
It's been great fun. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.